Retail media is a big deal, I think, for a few important reasons. For retailers who traditionally have had relatively slim margins, the opportunity to capture more margin is clear. I think they look at Amazon and they see how that has become essentially a rocket ship business. But I will note, Amazon has been working on it for a while. So it is something that doesn't happen overnight. You don't become successful as a retail media network overnight. But certainly the margin opportunity, the net new revenue opportunity for retailers is very clear, again, when they're operating businesses that don't necessarily see that kind of margin traditionally. I think the other reason that it's hot is because the buy side of the equation, the brands and the agencies who represent them, are desperate to get access to that kind of data, to the purchase data, the transactional kind of data that these retailers have that help brands make kind of smart media investments, understand the value of those media investments, so that they can reinvest for growth.
Joanna, so just explain to us a little bit about the use of data in the retail media scenario.
So retailers, of course, have lots and lots of data on their customers. That could be through e-commerce transactions. That also could be based on store data. That data is super interesting and super powerful because it is a great predictor, potentially, of what people are going to buy in the future. So what they're able to do with something like that is work with a brand who might have its own first-party data to help that brand get a richer understanding of its customers. They could also build off-the-shelf kinds of audience segments that are based on things like propensity to purchase or certain kinds of transaction types. And so that then creates sort of a bunch of opportunities for brands to be able to engage with consumers. Traditionally on the retailer's properties, right? So the way that this sort of started was search on a retailer's property or display advertising on a retailer's property, so within the environment of that retailer. One of the things that you're starting to see is to be able to create more scale, more opportunity. Retailers are looking at ways to find their audiences outside of their owned and operated environments.
What does the sell side look like? Does the sell side look like the retailers, or does the sell side look like media owners, or what could be the expanse of the sell side?
Right. What is the relationship here when we're talking about retailers getting into the media business? It's new. It's different, right? We traditionally think of publishers, media companies, as being the sell side, but you essentially have organizations that have traditionally been seen as brands, as marketers, like in Albertsons, becoming essentially sell side players. They are building out offerings that include audience data, media, measurement solutions, like a publisher might. But they certainly come from a different place than a traditional publisher.
So the investment comes from the brands primarily.
It's the interesting thing about retail media is it started, maybe not surprisingly, with shopper marketing, because those organizations were used to investing in certain kinds of ways in their relationships with these retailers. One of the growth areas is for this to grow beyond shopper marketing and into more traditional kind of corporate marketing dollars. Either way, you have brands involved, you have agencies involved, sometimes you have both involved.
And finally, there's been a lot of talk about margins, and the retail media is a high margin business. Could you explain that a little bit?
So the traditional retail business, where they're literally selling stuff off of shelves, works at a certain margin, and it's relatively thin. The media business, on the other hand, when you're charging CPMs, where the cost is essentially just associated with the management of kind of getting ads on pages and the people that are necessary to do that and the tech to support it, creates more upside, essentially, on the kind of bottom line to the retailer that comes in the door for them. So the margins are just significantly higher. So again, you look at someone like Amazon and you're a retailer and you say, wow, I see how this organization has been able to essentially carve out a net new business using assets that it has, which is consumer relationships, data, transactional data, and environments where they can serve ads. So again, margin upside, revenue upside. The interesting thing about retail media going forward is going to be how it matures. It is a very busy space right now. It's very hot, and that's appropriate. Like, there's a lot of opportunity for retailers and for brands and agencies. But it doesn't mean that it's a guaranteed success for every retailer. You need to think about things like balancing your customer's experience with that of your client on the advertising side. You need to think about how you scale effectively outside of the walls of your O&O essentially into the open internet. You need to think about how you can innovate ad formats beyond the particularly mundane search and display, as they exist today. They're not particularly exciting, right? They're fairly mundane. So how do you grow into more innovative formats? And those are just a few of the things that they need to think about. So no guarantee of success, lots of upside, lots of opportunity.